Hello friends, we are now going to start another famous dynasty of ancient Indian history, that is the Mauryan Empire, which is in 4th to 2nd century BC, to be very precise 321 to 185 BC. It is not important for you to remember exact years of the kings and the dynasty. Roughly what is expected from you, that in which century a particular dynasty or a famous king existed. So if you look at that, the Mauryans were between 4th to 2nd century BC. Now what is the importance of this dynasty and their contribution? We can understand under the headings of 3 great kings. The others are not very important. Of course, I will mention few of them. The founder, as you must have heard, was Chandragupta Maurya, who was a king between 321 to 298 BC. In some books you may find 322 also. His son Bindusara was a king between this period, and his son Ashoka was a king between 273 to 232 BC. The king who came after Ashoka was like Kunal, like Jaluk, like Samprati, and the last, that is Brihadrat, were not very important for us. So any good or bad thing happened, it happened actually in the days of these people. Now of course the first and the third in the list is more important for you. A lot of questions had already been asked in various competitive exams. So let's start Chandragupta Maurya in such a way that any question which is possible, you shall not miss it. Chandragupta Maurya, as I told earlier, was called by the Greeks as Sandrocotus and Androcotus. If you remember, when Alexander the Great came in 324 BC, just before Chandragupta Maurya came to power, he also met Chandragupta according to certain sources, and the Greek sources called him Sandrocotus and Androcotus. Now we have certain sources in India which informs about Chandragupta, and one of them is Puranas, that is the holy books of Hindu religion. Some Greek sources, some Jain literature. These are all written in different phases, so the historians have reconstructed about the history of Mauryans and Chandragupta Maurya especially. Now according to Puranas, he was son of Dhananand. Dhananand himself was a king of Magad, but there was a woman in his court called Mura, and they had relationship, and they gave birth to the man called Chandragupta Maurya. So his name Maurya derived from the word Mura according to Puranic sources, and he was basically son of Dhananand. And later on he took revenge from his father and killed him and became king with the help of a man called Chanakya, also famously known as Vishnugupta. But it's very difficult to verify this, because all these literature, as I told you, were written much later than the incident itself. The Greek literature, on the contrary, says that Chandragupta belonged to a humble family, not very noble family or royal family. The Mauryan literature, the Buddhist literature, which mostly talks about Ashoka, says that Ashoka was a Kshatriya. So by that logic, Chandragupta must be Kshatriya. The Jain literature, on the contrary, says that these people actually were a tribe, and they were dealing peacock that was called Mayur. So the word Maurya derived from the word Mayur. So if you have noticed, there are 4 different sources. The Puranic literature says that he was Shudra. The Greek literature says that he belongs to a humble family. The Buddhist literature says that he was a Kshatriya. And the Jain literature says that he was a tribe. So ultimately what net conclusion one can make, and that would be simply I don't know or we don't know. And of course in history there would be a lot of questions whose answer would be we do not know. And in such scenario, if a question is asked, they would definitely give not very known, not very clearly known, none of the above, etc. Or sometimes they may ask, match the following, like what the Greek said, what the Buddhist and the Brahmanical literature, etc. had said. Now this is about the origin of Chandragupta Maurya. The second point which I have already said to you, that he was trained by a man called Chanakya or Vishnugupta at a place called Takshila, and then he became king of Magad. Now his capital was Patliputra, which you all know is modern day Patna. He also defeated Seleucus Nicator, who was successor of Alexander the Great in Afghanistan, and after defeating him, he got from him Kabul, Kandahar, Herat and Baluchistan. So you have to remember that the territory which he got from Seleucus Nicator, according to different sources in ancient India, the first 3 are right now in Afghanistan, that is Kabul, Kandahar, Herat, and the 4th is right now in Pakistan, that is Baluchistan. Then they became friends, both Chandragupta and Seleucus Nicator, and Nicator also sent an ambassador called Megasthenes in the court of Chandragupta Maurya at Patliputra, and who perhaps arrived around 304 BC, not exactly, maybe plus minus few years. He wrote in detail about the city which he visited and praised the city Patliputra, that it was much beautiful city as he saw in the west, like Susa, like Ekbatna. These were the cities which he had seen in the west. He wrote that it was Patliputra was much better and more beautiful than these cities. The accounts of this man, of Megasthenes, is found in a book called Indica. This was originally written in Greek. Now the problem with which we have today is Indica is not available, but we know what was written by Megasthenes in the book Indica. And this is possible through the contemporary writers who had recorded when they read about Indica, and they recorded in their works. So you also have to now know that the contemporary writers who informs us about Indica, Arrian, Pliny the Elder, Justin. If you forget these names, just remember APJ, the former president of India, and you can easily remember Arrian, Pliny and Justin. Then Diodorus, Plutarch and Strabo. These are the 6 major people, some Roman and some Greek, who wrote about Indica. And again, if you forget these, just remember DPS, a famous school, and you can easily remember APJ and DPS. the people who wrote in 1st, 2nd, 3rd century AD about Indica, and we know about Indica through these books. So whatever he wrote, for instance, in Indica it is written there were 7 classes in India. So you may be asked, which of the following foreign traveler wrote that India had 7 classes? And sometime they ask few names also. For instance, he mentioned there's philosopher, that peasants, that craftsmen, that's in the third one, where basically the herdsman, that is shepherd, the craftsman, the soldiers, the inspectors, and the counselors. These are the class mentioned by Megasthenes exactly in the same order. So sometimes they may ask like the first class mentioned by Megasthenes, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh. Now most historians had rejected this entire theory given by Megasthenes, because we know that Indian society was basically not divided on class, but it was divided on caste. We know that class is based on your occupation, caste is based on your birth, and it was not in fact 7, there were 4 major castes. And this we can easily understand because Megasthenes came from West, where the society was divided in class. So when you are studying about a foreign traveler, make sure that they all are coming for a brief tenure, meeting selected people, and also coming with certain prejudices. So when they write, they do not write very correctly about the country where they stayed for few years. And this is what we have to take care while taking any account of any such foreign traveler. Of course, they also had certain importance which we will discuss at certain other time. Now, what Megasthenes also wrote, that the state collected 1/4 as tax from land produce, which we generally call as land revenue, and of course in different period of history it was known differently, which we will discuss. Though the Brahmanical literature of that time says that it was 1/6. So if it is asked that in Mauryan period what was the rate of land revenue, you have to first see that with what source the question has been asked. If the source is Megasthenes, then of course 1/4. If there is no source is given, or a Brahmanical literature or Indian source, then you have to pick up 1/6. But the point you have to understand is, unlike Delhi Sultans and Mughals, the rulers in ancient India did not leave their revenue accounts and revenue details, so it is all very guesswork. And secondly, it was all written in advance that the state should collect at this rate, whereas in Delhi Sultanate and Mughals record, when the revenue was already collected, then the account was given. So we have better picture about the sultans, especially from Alauddin Khilji onwards, as compared to the rulers of ancient time. That is how we cannot say with great authenticity that what exactly was the rate of revenue. These questions, if it is asked, you have to see the language. Now, Megasthenes wrote that Patliputra was approximately 16 to 18 kilometers long and approximately 3 to 3.5 kilometers wide. What is interesting, even today the city Patna is very much in this rectangular shape, as the width of the city is very thin, and that is because of the geographical and the rivers surrounded this city. So that shows the accuracy of Megasthenes while describing about Patliputra. Now it is also said in certain source that Megasthenes, that Seleucus Nicator and Chandragupta, when they became friends, they also became relative, but we don't have any authentic source that who became relative of whom. But what we know from some source that Chandragupta Maurya gifted some 500 elephants to Seleucus Nicator. So these are the points related to Megasthenes and Seleucus Nicator we have to remember. Now if any question is asked, hope you would not miss it. To remember exact years of the kings and the dynasty, roughly what is expected from you, that in which century a particular dynasty or a famous king existed. So if you look at that, the Mauryans were between 4th to 2nd century BC, who was a king between 321 to 298 BC. In some books you may find 322 also. His son Bindusara was a king between this period, and his son. Hello friends, we are now going to start another famous dynasty of ancient Indian history, that is the Mauryan Empire, which is in 4th to 2nd century BC, to be very precise 321 to 185 BC. It is not important for you. Ashoka was a king between 273 to 232 BC. The king who came after Ashoka was like Kunal, like Jaluk, like Samprati, and the last, that is Brihadrat, were not very important for us. So what is the importance of this dynasty and their contribution? We can understand under the headings of 3 great kings. The others are not very important. Of course, I will mention few of them. The founder, as you must have heard, was Chandragupta Maurya